I turned 70 last Tuesday. My daughter called from Oregon, sang happy birthday over the phone while her kids yelled in the background. My son sent a card that arrived 3 days late. Inside, he'd written "Love you, Dad," in handwriting I barely recognized anymore. I stood in my kitchen that evening, the card still in my hand, looking at the empty chair across from me where Margaret used to sit with her coffee and the morning paper. She'd been gone 2 years by then, and I'd gotten used to the silence. Or at least, I thought I had. But that birthday felt different somehow. Heavier. I kept thinking about all the years that had passed, wondering where they'd gone, wondering if I'd done any of it right. The house was clean. The bills were paid. I had enough money in the bank. My health was decent for a man my age. By any reasonable measure, I should have felt content. Instead, I felt like I had missed something important, something I couldn't quite name. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room until past midnight, just sitting there in the dark. And for the first time in a very long time, I let myself really think about my life. Not the version I told people at church or at the hardware store, but the true version, the one I'd been avoiding. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, the oldest of 4 boys. My father worked at the steel mill, and my mother kept house. We didn't have much, but we had enough. My father was a quiet man, stern but not unkind. He showed love through providing, through fixing things, through making sure we had what we needed. I don't remember him ever telling me he loved me, not in words. That wasn't how men talked back then. You showed up. You worked hard. You took care of your family. That was love. I learned that lesson well, maybe too well. When I met Margaret in 1976, I was 26 and working as an accountant at a small firm in Harrisburg. She was a secretary there, 23, with dark hair and a laugh that made everyone in the office turn around. We dated for 8 months before I proposed. I remember practicing what I'd say, standing in front of my bathroom mirror like a fool, trying to find the right words. When the moment came, at a restaurant I couldn't really afford, I just blurted it out. She said yes before I could even finish the question. We were married that fall. The early years were good. We were happy, I think, in the way young people are happy when everything is still new and full of promise. We had David in 1978 and Sarah in 1981. I worked long hours to support us, took on extra clients, brought work home on weekends. Margaret stayed home with the children. It was what we'd both expected, what everyone did. I thought I was being a good husband, a good father. I was providing. I was building a future for us. But somewhere along the way, providing became all I knew how to do. I stopped coming home for dinner. I stopped asking Margaret about her day. When the kids wanted to play, I was too tired, too busy with paperwork spread across the dining room table. David played Little League for 3 seasons, and I made it to maybe 5 games total. Sarah was in the school play her junior year of high school. I promised I'd be there. I had every intention of being there. But a client had an emergency, needed their taxes filed immediately, and I stayed at the office instead. Margaret went alone. She didn't say much about it when she got home. She'd stopped saying much about a lot of things by then. The distance between us had grown so gradually that I didn't even notice it happening. We still lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, but we'd become strangers. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages settled into routine after enough years. I told myself she understood that I was working hard for her, for the kids, for our future. I never asked if that's what she wanted. I never asked what she needed. I just assumed. David went to college in 1996. Sarah left 2 years later. The house got quiet. Margaret started volunteering at the library, joined a book club, took watercolor, painting classes at the community center. She made friends I never met, had conversations I wasn't part of. I noticed she seemed happier during those years, more animated when she talked about her days. But I was busy with work, thinking about retirement, about our savings, about making sure we'd be financially secure. I thought I was doing the right thing. When I finally retired at 65, I expected things to change. I thought we'd travel, spend time together, reconnect. But Margaret had built a whole life that didn't include me. She had her routines, her friends, her painting. I didn't know how to fit into it. I'd spent 40 years defining myself by my work, and suddenly I didn't know who I was supposed to be. We were polite to each other. We watched television in the evenings. We went to church on Sundays. But we didn't really talk. Not about anything that mattered. I wanted to. I'd open my mouth sometimes, try to find the words, but they wouldn't come. It was like I'd forgotten the language of intimacy. If I had ever known it at all. Then Margaret got sick. It started with fatigue. She couldn't shake. Then pain she tried to hide. By the time she finally agreed to see a doctor, the cancer had spread. They gave her 6 months. She lived for 8. During those months, I tried. I really tried. I went to every appointment. I learned to cook the soft foods she could manage to eat. I sat beside her bed and read to her from the books she loved. But even then, even facing the end, there was a wall between us I couldn't break through. One afternoon, maybe 3 weeks before she died, I was sitting in the chair beside her bed, and she said my name. Just Robert. Soft and tired. I took her hand, and she looked at me with these eyes that seemed to see right through me. She said, "I know you did your best." That was all. But the way she said it, I understood what she meant. My best hadn't been enough. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. After the funeral, the kids stayed for a few days, then went back to their lives. I didn't blame them. They had jobs, families, responsibilities. David called every Sunday. Sarah sent text messages I didn't always know how to respond to. They were good kids, good adults, but they felt far away, and I knew that was my fault too. I taught them that distance was normal, that love was something you showed through money and security rather than presence and words. The 2 years after Margaret died were the loneliest of my life. I kept the house clean. I played golf on Wednesdays with some men from church. I watched the news. I went to the grocery store. I existed, but I felt hollow inside, like I was walking through my days without really being present in them. That birthday, that 70th birthday, something finally cracked open inside me. Maybe it was the milestone. Maybe it was the accumulation of all those quiet, empty days. Maybe it was just time. But sitting there in the dark living room, I finally let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for years. The regret, the loneliness, the grief not just for Margaret, but for the marriage we could have had if I'd been different, if I tried harder, if I'd known how to let her in. I thought about all the Little League games I'd missed, all the school plays and recitals and parent-teacher conferences where Margaret sat alone. I thought about all the evenings I'd come home late, kissed her cheek without really looking at her, and gone straight to my office. I thought about all the times she tried to talk to me, really talk, and I'd been too distracted or too tired or too convinced that providing was the same as loving. I cried that night, not the polite tears I'd shed at Margaret's funeral, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere I didn't know existed inside me. I cried for her, for us, for all the time we'd wasted being in the same house, but living separate lives. I cried for my children, who'd learned from my example that fathers were distant figures who showed up occasionally, but never really let you in. I cried for myself, for the man I'd been and the man I'd failed to become. When the tears finally stopped, I felt emptied out, but also somehow clearer. I understood something I should have understood decades earlier. Love isn't just providing. Love isn't just showing up. Love is being present, truly present, in the small moments that make up a life. Love is asking questions and listening to the answers. Love is putting down the work and playing catch in the backyard, even when you're tired. Love is telling someone they matter, not just assuming they know. Love is being vulnerable enough to let someone see who you really are, flaws and fears and all. I'd spent my whole life armored up, convinced that being a good man meant being strong and stoic and self-sufficient. I'd thought emotion was weakness. I'd thought providing was enough. I'd been wrong. The next morning, I called David, not on Sunday like usual, but right then, at 7 a.m. West Coast time. He answered confused, worried something was wrong. I told him everything was fine. I just wanted to talk. We talked for an hour. Really talked. I asked him about his job, his marriage, his kids. I listened. I told him I was proud of him. I told him I was sorry for all the times I should have been there and wasn't. He got quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." We started talking more after that. Not just the Sunday check-ins, but real conversations. He told me things I'd never known about his life, his struggles, his dreams. I told him things I'd never shared with anyone, even Margaret. We were building something we should have had all along. I did the same with Sarah. She flew out to visit for a weekend, just her, and we sat in the kitchen for hours, drinking coffee and talking. I asked her about her life, really asked, and I listened without judgment or advice. I told her I was sorry for missing her play, for missing so many moments. She cried a little. She said she'd always wondered if I was proud of her. I told her I was. I told her I'd always been proud. I'd just never known how to say it. She hugged me tight, and I held on longer than I usually would have, longer than I was comfortable with, because I was learning that discomfort didn't kill you. Distance did. I started making other changes too, small ones. I joined Margaret's old book club at the library. I was the only man there, surrounded by 7 women in their 60s and 70s, but they welcomed me. We read books Margaret had loved and talked about them in ways I'd never considered. I started volunteering at the food bank on Thursday mornings. I took a watercolor class, the same one Margaret had taken, and I was terrible at it, but I kept going. I made friends, real friends, people I actually talked to, people who knew things about me beyond surface pleasantries. I started living instead of just existing. I wish I'd figured all this out sooner. I wish I'd understood at 30 what I finally learned at 70. I wish Margaret had lived to see me try to be different, to be better. But regret is a heavy thing to carry, and at some point you have to set it down, or it'll crush you. I can't change the past. I can't get back those years with Margaret, or those moments with my children when they were young. But I can change what I do with the time I have left. I can be present. I can be honest. I can let people in. Last month, David brought his family to visit. We spent a week together, and I played with my grandchildren the way I never played with my own kids. I got down on the floor with the Legos, even though my knees complained. I read bedtime stories with all the funny voices. I asked them about school and friends and what they wanted to be when they grew up, and I actually listened to their answers. On the last night of their visit, after the kids were in bed, David and I sat on the back porch. He looked at me and said, "You're different, Dad. Happier." I nodded. I told him I was trying to be the person I should have been all along. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's not too late." And he was right. It's not too late. Not for me and my children. Not for the friendships I'm building. Not for the life I'm still living. I'm 70 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. Could be 5 years, could be 20. But however long it is, I'm going to spend it differently than I spent the first 70. I'm going to be present. I'm going to say the things that need saying. I'm going to let people know they matter to me. I'm going to be vulnerable and honest and open, even when it's uncomfortable. What I finally understood at 70 is something so simple it almost sounds stupid to say out loud. But it's true, and it's important, and it's the thing I wish I'd understood when I was young. Life isn't about the house you own, or the money you save, or how hard you work. It's about the people you love, and whether you let them know it. It's about being there, really being there, in the ordinary moments that turn out to be the only moments that matter. It's about connection and presence, and having the courage to be fully human, fully yourself, with all your imperfections and needs and emotions. For so many years, I thought being strong meant never needing anyone, never showing weakness, never asking for help or comfort or connection. I thought love was something you proved through sacrifice and work. I was wrong. Love is something you live every day in 1,000 small ways. It's the conversation over coffee. It's the hand held across the table. It's showing up not just physically but emotionally. It's saying I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I need you, and meaning it. It's letting yourself be known. That's what really matters. Not the legacy you leave in money or possessions, but the love you gave and received, the connections you made, the moments you were truly present for. At 70, I finally understand that. And even though I can't go back and do it all differently, I can do it differently now. And that's enough. It has to be enough. Because it's all any of us really have. This moment, this day, this chance to love the people in our lives while we still can. I don't want to waste another day of it.